Yo guys, welcome back to History with Heath, and today we'll be looking at 1066. This is my second episode on my series about the Anglo-Saxons in 1066, and my next episode, of course, will not be in this series, it will be in my normal pattern, and will be about religion, about Celtic Christianity, which sort of relates to what I was talking about on my first video. Anyway, let's get into it, I don't want to bore you. So, we begin where we left off last episode, which is the death of Edward the Confessor. Edward the Confessor had ruled England since 1042, and he died on the 5th of January 1066 after a long period of illness. His last days and months were dominated by uncertainty over succession, as he had no children and no clear relatives to succeed him. This left a large vacuum that powerful families rushed to fill, including the Godwinsons, which we will touch on. According to some sources, especially the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, Edward named Harold Godwinson, one of the most powerful nobles in England, as his successor on his deathbed, which, contradictory to other sources, especially Norman sources, said that he had long before then promised the throne to William, Duke of Normandy, who descends from Rollo, so in a way, a Viking had been promised the throne. His funeral happened on the 6th of January, and Harold was crowned on the same day. And this is probably likely to prevent from any rivals from gaining momentum on their own claims to the throne. To many, Harold was a natural choice, as he was an experienced leader and a brother-in-law to the late king, and was elected by the Witan themselves, which was the form of council of nobles that would elect kings in the Anglo-Saxon kingdom. Although Harold was promised to be king on his deathbed, William had been promised the throne many years before, when Edward the Confessor was in his prime, and therefore this gave both Harold and William equal claims to the throne, which of course just makes even more sense about how it led to the invasion of the Normans that would change Britain forever. But then we have a third view, which I didn't talk about in my last video, which was the Scandinavian view. King Harald Hardrada of Norway believed that he was also the true king of England, due to his direct line of succession from Canute, who he believed was Canute, but like half a Canute as well, who was the last Viking king of Britain, if you don't include the Normans as being Viking kings of England. Harold spent the early days of his reign preparing for the invasion from both the Scandinavians, the Norwegians, and the Normans. He raised the Fyrd, a militia, and stationed forces along the southern coast, and expected William to strike first due to the closer proximity and the larger nature of the dispute between William and Harold, because the dispute between Harold and Harald Hardrada wasn't as heated. It was still heated, but not as heated. But, of course, as many of you know, this did not happen. Although William did want to strike first, bad weather blew him off course, which stopped him from invading. So Harold was right in a way, but the wind basically led to him getting it wrong, and led to what many say to be a disaster. In September 1066, the Norwegian invasion came. Harold Hardrada landed in Yorkshire and was joined by Harold's own brother, Tostig Godwinson, who had been exiled. And their main goal was to seize the throne and punish Harold, because there was just a big rivalry between Tostig and Harold. And then Harold pulled off a feat. He was able to march from London to York in just 4 days with his army. And this is 185 miles. Just thinking about that. Anyway, he was able to catch the Norwegians completely off guard. But and then we get to the Battle of Stamford Bridge on the 25th of September, so days later. Harold led a surprise attack on Stamford Bridge, and this led to a devastating outcome for the Scandinavian force. Hardrada's forces were unarmoured and expected negotiations instead of a proper battle. The fighting was very fierce, with there being a berserker on the bridge who was able to take down 80 English men, I believe, but was actually killed by being speared up the backside. The victory was total. Harold on top, but was very costly. His army had been depleted, and the news would come soon. The news that William of Normandy had landed at Penissy just 3 days later on the 28th. And just to let you know, Ponsonby is in Sussex. I forget that. I forget that not all my listeners are English, British, and they don't know about this. Anyway, of course, his army was mainly Norman, of course. Well, it's his army. He's a Norman. His army will be Norman. But there's also lots of mercenaries there who are Breton and Flemish. So we got some Celtic people fighting there. Because if you don't know, even though you probably do know if you're somebody who watches my channel, the Bretons, who are still around, so live in Brittany, which is that peninsula on the northwest of France, and they actually descended from the Celts, from Cornwall and Wales, that fled during the Anglo-Saxon time and settled in Brittany and became the Bretons and created their own language, which is Breton. And also, when I say Breton, I'm not saying Britain, I'm saying Breton, B-R-E-T-O-N, not Britain. William had immediately built a defensive castle on modern Bailey at Hastings, as he knew that Harold would be coming soon. And he used fear tactics, because while he was in control of this tiny area in Sussex, he used terror tactics and ravaged the local population and massacred many men, women and children. Harold marched south again, but not at the same speed as before, and reached London by the 6th of October. And despite advice to gather more troops, as most of his troops had actually left to get their harvest, because in Anglo-Saxon military society, most soldiers were temporary soldiers who were also farmers, so his army had actually lost lots of men. But despite this advice, he pushed on and wanted to confront William quickly to get this over with, to get this feud over with. And now we get on to the bigger moment. The Battle of Hastings, 14th of October, 1066. They met on Senlac Hill, so not actually in Hastings, but near Hastings, which is one thing to note. Harold's army formed a shield wall and was a dense line of overlapping shields, with the most of them being infantry. There weren't really any cavalry or archers, and they were mainly armed with axes, not really any swords or spears. The Norman position was more stable, although the shield wall is a good tactic, but the Normans, they had many cavalry, infantry and archers, and they had well-supplied routes, and they were very tactically flexible. And William was personally commanding in the centre, so that makes him a big target. The fighting lasted all that day, and the Norman attacks initially failed to break the shield wall, but at several points the Normans did what they called the feigned retreat, where they pretend to retreat, which made the English charge and break their shield wall, but then the cavalry would swing around and break the lines.